No, you can text her though, because she got you can text her what I text you because I got the link in there. No, I'm about to broadcast what we're doing on my page as well.
As soon as you go live, volume up, you hit cut, and then after that, go
public, done.
He already went to. Here we go.
All right, clap it up, Hotep. Woo! Sinners, the full college lecture, the rapping professor. Yeah, just that volume. I talk like a rapper. So for those who are just viewing this for the first time in terms of the Afrocentric think tank, which is the hub of Afrocentric thought, I would say, in the universe, but I would make sure that if you're in the Philadelphia area, 5535 Germantown Avenue, without further ado, you might have seen a lot of different recaps and explanations of the film. And there were certain things that I didn't see, in a lot of those conversations. So I'm not going to focus so much on what you've already had, exposure to. I'm going to focus more on some of my personal perspectives and thoughts. But without further ado, they say, why do you call yourself the rapping professor? And there's a philosopher. His name is Meek Mill. And I was so inspired by this philosopher, this street poet, Griot, as they would say in the movie, right? That I created this introduction. I say, are you ready? You say, yeah. I say, you ready? Yeah. I used to pray to speak like this to peeps like this, Coretta and Martin, queens and kings like this in the back of a paddy wagon. Cuffs was on my wrist, but thinking how my ancestors had it worse than this. When our dreams take hold, nightmares are through. It's time to marry our destiny. Now say I do. Far as freedom, you got to see it with clear eye view so the ancestors could bless you. Like you said, I shoot, but you got to read. Let that breathe before they come for me. I'm getting deep. Never let no fear get in between intended targets. Literally finish what you started. They love you, deaf, dumb, and blind. Hate it when you get smarter. I went and got it regardless. Vision it like an artist. When the struggle gets harder, remember you the hardest. When the goddess is goddess. Okay, let me slow it down. Okay, I only got an hour today. Because y'all was looking captivated. I should keep it going. I don't know. Be a god or a goddess with people over your private and pay no mind to them cowards. I tell my haters, I got this. See, I know that my mind is power. I'm speaking to take us higher. Back at Temple, we bring that fire. So I keep it real so the chosen could be inspired. When you got your mind right, then the hate increase. They blaming it on sagging pants and copping beats. I couldn't stop. So I slaughter beats from the streets to the barbershop. Fans be like, oh, head, your bars are hot. You gotta pop. If you ain't talking about uplifting, what we talking about? Real gangsters move in silence. You see some talk a lot. I'ma use my words, and I'ma use the word on my grind until we get what we deserve. Now get up. Hold up. Wait a minute. They thought we was finished. Took away the money for the schools to build their prisons. Flexing on my haters just like Papa with his spin is double M. Yeah, I'm a G. I make a movement, making millions. Type to come with them Garvey and them Doc Asante quotes. Melissa Harris Perry, some Ta-Nehisi Coates. Some Mark Lamont Hill for their young minds to glow. And some names y'all ain't recognize when you Google that when you go. Because this more than about bill money or just keeping it real. Those who brought this truth before me been killed. They caught around and put them down. They in the ground, no joke. I come to make this clear for y'all. No mirrors and no smoke. Yo, all I know is learning. When it comes to me, I got books on Afrocentrics. I got books on Dr. King. Got my 3 ABA, about to have a PhD. And every time I give a lecture, I'll be turning up the heat. Bars. Let's go, y'all. Woo. I was going to slow down for time, but I said, I'm the rap professor. I'm going to take time for the raps, right? Yes, I said I got my BA in Asian studies. I got 3 master's degrees, one in liberal arts, one in African American studies, and one in education, and a PhD in African American studies. I'm working on ED, a doctorate in education now, and my focus is microaggressions against Black women in academia. And if you're from the era, you might remember there was a sister, LaWanda Jenkins, a librarian at Temple University. She had transitioned and she was wrestling with some medical issues. And one of the coworkers said that they ran her into the ground with their sick leave policies. And after that, Joanne Epps, the acting president at Temple University, who was formerly the dean of the college, the law school, fell out on stage, collapsed on stage during a commemoration for Charles Blockson, who had recently transitioned. And she transitioned, shortly after, being in front of everybody in the family. And then after that, there was a story about a sister, Sister Bailey. Dr. Bailey was the vice president at Lincoln University in Missouri. That's the sister that took her own life because she said she was being so thoroughly harassed and mistreated by the white man who was the president, and the students were trying to push for some sanctions, and they let him come back and have his job. So after that, I said, we need to have a conversation about this because there's something really going on when what seems like a cushy job, a dream job, right? I was working at the radio station, and radio station was ranked under college professor when they were talking about dream jobs. So if Black people, especially Black women, are living the American dream and have achieved and done all that they can do in terms of credentials and degrees and can't even function to the point they want to be alive in some of these workspaces, then I think that we need to, definitely look at what's going on in America as far as how we're treating our sisters, right? So with that being said, prerequisites they always have. Now, I know a lot of people watch this might not have saw the movie, but my goal is to make you want to see the movie again. That's my goal. That my point today is to make you say, I didn't even think of that. So you might even want to go back. So if you watch the film, that's even better. Know the base of the storyline. Two brothers from Mississippi came back home from Chicago, had interaction with organized crime, looking to open what they call a juke joint. There's a lot of symbolism, a lot of spirituality, a lot of layers and character development, and there's vampires. I hope I did that summary justice for the 20 seconds I used to explain it. There's a character in the film called Grace. Grace is married to a man named Bo, has a daughter named Diana, and a lot of people were surprised about the Chinese presence in the 1930s in Mississippi. But people who are historians were like, yes, we understand who was there, who wasn't there, right? There was a consensus from a certain segments of the Latino community about why they weren't in there. And then people were educating them, saying y'all was there before that, but then y'all wasn't there, so that's why you weren't in there. The stores used to be across the street, right? So there used to be a Black store and a white store, right? And across the street. And ironically, the Asians in the film have a store on the Black side and on the white side. So I won't say corrected somebody. I had a conversation recently where somebody was talking about basically picking ourselves up by our bootstraps and doing what other ethnic groups have done. There's a debate by Huxley and James Baldwin where Huxley poses the same question, like, why can't y'all do what other people do? And James Baldwin politely educates Huxley about the unique experiences of African people throughout the world, and primarily the unique experiences of African Americans. And he talks about the skin is the difference, right? Other people are able to become white and, function in ways that African Americans have not been able to function. They don't have the same history of a Tulsa, Oklahoma, or, but we'll get into it. But Grace in the film is looked at as a betrayer by some. And in one scene, she bites the hand that's trying to cover up her mouth that literally feeds her and invites the evil in terms of the evil spirits and the vampires. So people are like, y'all are too hard on Grace. Grace was a mother. And, there was cultural encroachment because she said that white devil spoke Chinese to me in the scene. But it was ironic because I was under the impression I was anti-Grace. I was like, oh, Grace done did it. But then I saw the film again. And I watched how before the last straw, there's usually a lot of things that occur to get to that point. Has anybody ever been in a situation with somebody where they get you mad, but then they look at your response more than what brought on the response? They'll mistreat you and gaslight you and do a million things. But the second you raise your voice, the second you speak out of turn, the second you want to leave this, then you're the problem. And I had to look at the film and I said, Grace didn't build this situation, By the time Grace does what who saw the film? Just want to make sure. By the time Grace does what she does, Sammy had already not listened to his father. Smoke and Stack had already made decisions, that they knew weren't according to what everybody had done wrong. Everybody had succumbed to all kind of sin, even throughout the course of the night. Even in terms of Sammy playing the music that brought the vampires in the vicinity in the first place. That scene that we always, say is so beautiful because it explains the shared history of African-American music. But nobody ever says if Sammy hadn't played that darn guitar, they would have never showed up. And they were looking for him personally. Right? So I was too hard on Grace. There's enough of this to go around. So I want to make sure that I share the wealth. Okay. Now, when the movie first came out, I was scared because the movie looked so black. And because Black Panther 1 is not like Black Panther 2 for a reason. They poured all kind of water on that one, right? Let me not start no problems. Oh, that's messy, but it's so true. It only made half the amount of money. I think that's part of the reason why. But these are two films that you might not have seen that were given the treatment that I feared sinners would receive. Because usually when a movie is too black, if you haven't seen The Banker, it's because it didn't get the publicity and it was too black. And you might not even have known when it came out in the theater. Because it came and went so fast, and all they talked about was a controversy with some members of the family that the movie was based on, and how they had issues with some of the films and all the rights, and all they promoted was the negative. They didn't say nothing about the performances. They didn't say nothing about the storyline and how it can inspire young people that are considered YNs and wayward to get into, empowerment and cooperative economics in their own community. They didn't say none of that. All they said was there's beef over here. Don't look over here. Take the movie out theater. Didn't do good the first 2 weeks. And if you remember the situation with Birth of a Nation, the Birth of a Nation movie, that's when the sexual harassment allegations from 20 to 30 years ago came out about the brother. And he never really worked the same again. Right on time. The movie was coming out, and then allegations from college that he was found not guilty on popped up. So when Sinners was coming out, I said, man, they about to do it again. They about to do another. If you watch the Boondocks, don't watch these movies over there, right? If you watch the Boondocks, you catch the reference. But luckily for us, the movie was so spectacular. There's, I think Steve Martin, the comedian, he says, be too good to ignore. That's a good way to live your life. Be too good to ignore, right? I think in our community, we say be twice as good, right? That's what the elders say to us. When we were going to school and stuff like that, and we couldn't go to other people's schools, and the best and brightest of our community was going to Fisk and Tuskegee and coming back to our community like Du Bois and Dr. King, and the teachers were such a pivotal, position in our community, such a highly esteemed position in the Black community was to be an educator because of their potential, to mold and to break generational chains and to inspire people. Like Dr. Santi said to me, did you ever consider the PhD in African American Studies? I say it all the time. That's the reason I'm here before you today. One person in 4 seconds of time saw something in me I never saw or considered for myself, took a seed and planted it through one statement, and it blossomed into everything that I'll ever do in my life. I was not thinking about it. I didn't want to do it. I didn't see myself doing it. And if it wasn't for representation like him, just seeing a brother doing that, I'm saying him just being who he was, setting that example, and then recognizing and acknowledging that I exist and have potential, and then saying something to me that changed the way that I thought about what was possible for my life. Every time I'm before people, I realize the power of life and death is in those words, because I was fed that way. I was transformed by a statement. So, but these were the blackest Michael B. Jordan we ever saw. I don't care what movie you like or what you saw him in. When they talk about spirits and energies and ancestors and all, oh man, they was all over this brother. They was all over this brother in this film. Well, I see these brothers, no pun intended. But one of the things I thought about, because I work in the industry, I'm in the Screen Actors Guild. I do background work and all that. And I said, as an actor, a lot of times you got to commit to projects, sometimes a year or 2 years in advance, depending on the shooting schedule. Like that Marvel Universe thing, that's like the bat signal. If once you sign on to the DC and the Marvel Universe, when they call, you just got to go. They don't care about no other little movie you making. This is how it works when you got a character. So for Michael B. Jordan to say, you know what? I'm going to sign on with my man Coogler. We do all these films together. The money couldn't have been what he was offered. I can only imagine that when Jonathan Majors was running 3 blocks away from that white woman and still ended up getting in trouble and losing his whole career. I should say that again. When Jonathan Majors ran away from a white woman for 3 blocks and still lost his whole career, you got to imagine that there was a lot of people that were thinking, who else could we call? There's only 2 or 3 people that fit that mold. I'm talking about the type of physique, the type of notoriety, the type of acting ability. This is like a small club. There's waves of it, right? At one point, it was Denzel and it was Wesley Snipes. Like, the waves of it. They had like 2 or 3 main character black actors. Right now is Michael B. Jordan. Well, it was Michael B. Jordan, Jonathan Majors, and maybe 1 or 2 other names that were interchangeable. So can you imagine how Michael B. Jordan's phone was ringing off the hook when Jonathan Majors' name was taken off the proverbial table of possibilities? He chose to do this. He didn't have to do this black movie. So I just imagine him not taking a devil's bargain in terms of all the things that could have been offered to him. And I would estimate it's probably some of those Jonathan Major roles. So people were even comparing some of these scenes, to this Avengers universe, right? But I want to talk about fan fiction. If you're familiar with fan fiction, that's when they make stuff up and they make stories about it. Sometimes they let the AI write the story. They say, I want to see a story about Dr. Asante first meeting Sheikh Anta Diop and them going to the pyramids and talking to Ramses. And AI will print up a whole story for you within like 30 seconds. So, they'll look over the whole internet. And I was imagining, could you imagine somebody saying, what if there was an Avengers style Morris Gullah indigenous black gangster voodoo priestess Asian storekeeper set in Mississippi during Jim Crow, and they robbed the mob before battling vampires in a juke joint? That's literally what the movie's about. When I talk about imagination, they call it an elevator pitch. Within like 12 seconds, I got to convince you to green light my picture. If I was in the elevator with Steven Spielberg or somebody from Paramount, I got to be able to say, listen, I got this great movie. It's like, it's colors meets Menace to Society, meets Higher Learning, and the people are battling, but it's like the great debaters. I got to be able to explain it with things you already know and piece it together so you get this new idea. This idea was so revolutionary and so new that you had to reach a level of autonomy and reputation to even consider advancing an idea like this. You can't take these kind of chances on your first film. Nobody's backing you. They don't know you. I prove record. He made a good point when they were talking about the deal he had. He said this isn't the first time the deal like this has been made, when he says he gets the rights in 25 years and all that, and the money's been given. He also made it a point to note on Democracy Now!, I've made over $2 billion for this company. I'll say that again. He said, I made over $2 billion, 1.35 for the first Black Panther, and almost 750 million for the second one. He made over $2 billion. And he said he could speculate why they're talking about it. He didn't say it because he's Black, right? But this whole notion of who are you to deserve it, right? The one thing that's interesting about the film is the way that it mimics life, and not just in terms of the general, consensus of what's going on politically and culturally. I'm saying the life of the actors, the life of the director, in terms of people taking a certain stance and not taking a compromise. Because I'm sure Ryan Coogler could have made White Girls too. I took that too far. But I'm saying this: the offer's always there. The devil's always knocking. I was perplexed that more people weren't comparing this to The Color Purple with all the similarities to The Color Purple. If you remember The Color Purple, one of my favorite scenes of The Color Purple, maybe God is trying to tell you something right now, right? And she's walking down the street and she's singing because she hears the music from the church, and the people in the community start following her down that dirt road, right? And Suge Avery is coming back home to preach her father. And I'm watching the movie, and I see the doors open to the church. The first thing I thought about was The Color Purple. Because she came busting in the doors of that church. Everybody said, oh my God, the sinner is back, right? And then the preacher, and they have an embrace. Everything that happened in the movie. I was watching every breakdown, every explanation. But that's what happens when a lot of people who are given explanations were just given explanations in terms of style and in terms of symbols, but they weren't from the culture. So certain things didn't resonate. There weren't certain callbacks, right? But if you look at the road itself and the fact they're walking into these churches and there's a discrepancy between the sinning child and the overbearing preacher father, it will be hard not to. And where did Suge Avery perform at? A juke joint. So to miss all of this is like just either you just so racist and sexist that you don't want to acknowledge Alice Walker's contribution, or you ain't part of the culture. And that's why I got this on today. Black. Okay. Yeah, maybe God is. See, but if you saw the movie, you see the similarities. The 3 crosses instead of 1, in the white church, and all that, right? This other one I haven't seen yet. They meet every character one by one in their element, and they recruit them on a journey along this dirt or yellow brick road. I'm sitting in the theater and I get home and I say, I know everybody going to be comparing this to The Wizard of Oz. Not a single person. Right? I didn't see it. I watched a whole bunch of videos, but if think about Delta Slim in particular. Remember when they met the Scarecrow? But forget The Wizard of Oz. The Wiz. Remember when Michael Jackson was on it? They come upon the next person. They talk about a dilemma. Delta Slim was saying, I don't want to play with you because your juke joint is here tonight. Might not be here tomorrow. Foreshadowing, because it literally wasn't. But he talks about being in this compromise situation where he's getting paid in alcohol, but it's guaranteed, right? Then there's this whole exchange, right? Just like if the lion was scared to go with Dorothy, but then there's this exchange and and I'm looking at this like, wow, this is like a new age Wizard of Oz, right? And then there's a montage at the end of the first part of the movie, because it's like 2 movies, right? Where you see them all in the car together. And they're playing the music, right? You see Bo letting Grace in the car. You see Stax riding everybody else in the car. You see Smoke and Annie, right? I'm thinking Wizard of Oz. They're all going down to the road to this Emerald City, to this juke joint. But these are some of the comparisons that if you watch the movie again, you'll see things in a way you didn't see them before. And that's my goal today, to make you want to see the movie again if you haven't already seen it a few times. Now, the man you're looking at here is a rapper. His name is Special Ed. He had a song called I Got It Made. 1989, Special Ed. He says, I'm your idol, the highest title, numero uno. I'm not a Puerto Rican, but I'm speaking so that you know and understand I got the gift of speech, and it's a blessing. So listen to the lessons I teach. He's in a junkyard. He talks about having an island of his own, a frog, a dog with a solid gold bone. An accountant to account the amount I spent. A treaty with Tahiti because he owns a percent. This man was saying he owned a percentage of Tahiti and he was in a junkyard. And we loved it. This is a classic rap song because we understood the power of imagination. We understood the power of speaking it into existence as though it was. We knew he was a high school kid in New York, probably living in the projects just like the rest of us. But it was something about the fact that he could see it meant that he was that much closer to being able to get it. So we recognized that. We didn't really think he had these things at 16, 17. But this whole thing in our tradition, in our community, is understanding that when we say things, we can bring things to ourselves. And he could have shot this in somebody else's house like a lot of rappers do. He could have pretended he was rich. But if you know rap in the 80s, it wasn't about that. The understanding was the street lights out. We're going to plug the power in from the street light. We don't have a dance floor. We're going to use linoleum or a cardboard box. We don't have 4 walls or a roof to even raise, but we're going to party right here in the park. So the whole foundation is on visualization and the understanding your creativity can create your universe. So shout out to Special Ed for that. At times like this in our nation and in our world, we need to confront and realize the magnitude of the present moment within the context of temporal, fleeting nature of the moment and the ethereal or delicate nature of our very existence. We're not going to be here forever. Damon Wayans was talking recently in an interview that went viral, and he said on his tombstone, he wanted to read, "Don't cry for me, you next." Right? I like that, right? Don't cry for me, you next. Sometimes people say things like, you can go broke doing that. You don't want to take that chance. And I used to wonder to myself, how do you think it's going to end for you? Like you going to end up taking chances and dying or not taking chances and dying? Like sometimes people's fears, most fear is very irrational, right? So people don't really focus. I think it was who had the Steve Jobs when he had cancer. He gave a brilliant speech, not just the one he gave for the college commencement. That's a viral video online. He's one on stage where he talks about realizing the reality of your mortality being your greatest superpower. When you realize that it's going to end and you don't know when it's going to end, you just wake up with a whole different energy. You just make the most out of everything. And if this is going to be my last day, if this is going to be my last lecture, I would bring this type of energy because I don't know if I have another chance to give a lecture ever again. So I'm going to give it like, ooh, end scene, right? All on the floor, last lecture, right? So he was saying this allows you to live. Once you know it's going to end and you embrace that and confront that and recognize that and be like, this could be the last day. I ain't got time to argue. This could be the last day. I ain't got time to be afraid and not follow my heart and my spirit. This could be my last day. I want to make sure that however I go out, it's going to be on top, at least as far as what I stand for and what I believe and what I had the opportunity to engage with, right? So this too shall pass was a theme, throughout the story as well. But knowing how the story ends, living with hope for a better tomorrow. I always talk about the notion of people on plantations saying, before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave. I'm going to say that again. You're in bondage. You've been potentially on that first wave of enslaved Africans in the Ma'afa under the hulls of ships, laying in vomit and feces and blood, and you've been bound. You've been put on an auction block. You've been observed and prodded and tested and bidded on. You've been separated from your family members and your children and your husband and your wife, and you've been sent to slave quarters to work from sun until, right? You still find it in your heart to have a song that not just affirms your humanity, but denies the prioritization over your humanity from your condition. This is your circumstance. It is not who you are. Yeah, you whipped me. Yeah, you bought me. Yeah, you sold me. Before I be what you called me, before I be a slave, I'll be dead. You just took my child yesterday. You just raped my wife last week. Before I be what you think I am, just because you treat me like this don't mean it's what I am. You know how powerful that is? To have your back whipped open, your child taken from you. You have not. I'm not a slave, though. I know I'm not. I know what I'm not. I know what I'm not. I might be a victim of abuse. I might be a prisoner of war. But this whole notion of not accepting other people's labels and other people's vision, Du Bois called it the racial gaze, right? I'm not seeing myself the way they see me. If they're afraid, that's their problem. I always tell people, don't own other people's sickness. Don't say it's because I'm black. Don't say it's because I'm a woman. Say it's because they're racist, because they're sexist, because it's their problem. Now, if you remember the movie Life, just like that Special Ed with the I Got It Made in the junkyard, visualizing owning a piece of Tahiti in a solid gold bone. Some of y'all might remember Ray's Boom Boom Room. If you saw the movie Life. And some of y'all might remember that whole scene about you gonna eat your cornbread, and then there's a character cornbread, in the movie Sinners, right? But they're in the jail cell, and here they are imagining a better life. They have life in prison. The movie's called Life. So they're not getting out. But in their mind, oh man, this dream that he never let go of, he gonna call it Ray's Boom Boom Room. And then they do this whole montage of Eddie Murphy, leading this whole juke joint type thing. Oh no, this whole ragtime thing in vaudeville. And then you think you like the Harlem Nights situation, right? Because I'll get to that in a minute. I want to make sure I keep it going. But okay, this is another one. If you're familiar with the godmother of rock and roll, Rosetta Tharpe. Didn't it rain? Right? If you're familiar with there's a famous video of her at a train station performing Didn't It Rain? So when they go to the train station and they're doing all this blues playing, first thing I think of is Sister Rosetta. That's my reference. My cultural reference goes right back to Rosetta Tharpe. She's the one I saw playing like that, literally at a train station. Everybody watching her play. And then I see Delta Slim, and I'm thinking about, like a Cowardly Lion type scarecrow confrontation, with the Wizard of Oz and all that, right? So he says maybe it's here tonight, right? But he's tempted by the alcohol. So this temptation, it seemed like every piece was necessary to make the night what it was. If somebody just said, no, I'm not going, it wouldn't have went. If Delta Slim said, can't do it. If Smoke and Stack had decided to do it next week, the way Smoke suggested, but Stack said do it tonight because he talked about the sky, a great night to be free. If anybody had did anything different, like let's not get to Grace later on in the film and her decision. Let's talk about the decision to do it tonight when the feeling was maybe not tonight. Let's talk about Delta Slim knowing darn well this $20 might be one time, but then when the alcohol comes out, it changes his mind. We're not going to get to the adultery until later, but let's go another story. Quick question I got for y'all. What was the situation with Delta Slim and the garlic? If you remember, Delta Slim looked like he didn't eat the garlic, but then he starts choking on the garlic, and then he just stops choking all of a sudden. And it was a lot going on there. And I'm saying this because this is one of the things I had no answer for. And if you see the movie again, I want you to watch when other people take the garlic, put it into their mouth clearly, and then Delta Slim does and does all this theatrics, it looks like in some. I just want you to watch it. Next time you see it, you watch the garlic scene and you just figure out if he ate it, what was the response about? Why was he reacting to that? Because he did say, talk to the devil about his old friend Delta Slim at one point in the thing too. So I don't know if there was something going on the spiritual end with the garlic and him. And that's why he was willing to make the sacrifice he made later in the film, or if he didn't take the garlic at all. But that's just something I want you to look at. Because a lot of people talk about Robert Johnson at the Crossroads making a deal with the devil in terms of getting good at music, but they didn't talk about, other specifics in the scene. Convict Leeson. Ooh, one of the best scenes in the film. Y'all remember when they was on the road and they saw the Chain Gang, right? Chain Gang was singing and working, and Delta Slim, reaches out and connects with them from the Emancipation Proclamation, 1865 to about 1941. For almost 90 years, people were leased to corporations. They started to criminalize normal behavior. And in the movie, they said that when Delta Slim is telling that story about the pain that he experienced, with the death of somebody close to him, and connected that with the blues and started, hitting the side of the car, that scene they said was going to be cut out the film, but it's so important and vital to the film's telling of the story. He said vagrancy. The charge was vagrancy, just hanging out. You don't have any papers, unemployed. Stealing a pig was a popular one. Using profanity, sitting on a fence, not having your papers. Right? When they couldn't legally keep you in bondage, they just turned immediately and started to criminalize just being you, like black identity extremism. A few years back. So Slavery by Another Name is a book and a documentary that talks about the convict leasing system. A lot of my students in college don't know about convict leasing. They come to class and never heard of it. And I'm like, how do you vote on mass incarceration without knowing that there's a history of convict leasing that lasts almost 100 years? And how could you judge or critique another community's engagement with policing if you don't know that this originated during the slave patrols? So a lot of it, I'm hoping that the movie reveals some things that can help people to get a better understanding. It says the slaves are sometimes chained together when they go to work in the fields, lest their love of liberty should induce them to make violent efforts to escape. So this is while they were talking about liberty for everybody else. A lot of times you hear about chain gangs and see chain gangs and you don't see the children. So I want to make sure I showed you a juvenile chain gang. Some of these children look about 6 to 8 years old in the front. Because a lot of this story, when they say they want to take away the books and the history, this is why. The reason why they don't want you to know is because there's no way, I've never heard anybody going to Africa and coming back the same. The whole right of return, like the Jewish brothers and sisters, like when people say reparations, part of our reparations should be a right to return a few places. A diasporic return. Y'all pay for the plane tickets and the hotels, but the fear is if we leave and we see something different, just like a toxic relationship where they say, ain't nobody gonna love you like me, Tina. And she's like, oh, Ike, maybe you right. Okay, mister, I stay in the house for a few more scenes, right? No. If you leave and see anything else, you can be like, oh, you was a loser. You was abusive. You ain't that special, right? And they know that if we leave America and go to some of these other places, and even just the cost of living alone might make us say, these places are better, right? So juvenile chain gangs, he says, keep your head. Delta Slim yells to the brothers on the chain gang, keep your head. And the first thing I thought of course, as a big Tupac fan who teaches a class on Tupac, keep your head up. Jay-Z has a line in one of his songs that says, all the hustlers, they love it just to see one of us make it. Just to see you free, right? Like a jailbreak. If you ever watch them Shawshank Redemption type films, all the brothers are still locked down, Solar Dad brothers energy. Like we gonna be the rest of our life, but you only had 3 years. So go out there, young blood, and change your life and, write me and send me some pictures of some pretty girls. Like live for me, right? And the brothers on the chain gang are seeing them riding on the road free, which is probably the dream of somebody in bondage, right? I'm literally watching you ride by, living my dream, and you look like brothers. They weren't like working for somebody, right? And he stood up and he said what he said, and then immediately the overseers tried to shoot the gun to instill fear and return them to their place, right? One thing that I thought was really interesting was the I call it Black Love Unrestricted, right? And this is good and bad because, like you said, there's characters, Pearline and Sammy with the adultery, and then Mary and Stack, similar thing, right? There's these cultural boundaries, right? You see a lot of transcendence of boundaries, whether it's racial, whether it's biblical in terms of who's supposed to be with who, and even in terms of time and space when it comes to Smoking Annie. They have a very intense scene where she says that his body didn't forget her. I'm trying to keep it PG as possible. Smoking Annie was pretty steamy in the movie, so I'm trying to, just keep it, keep it PG. Okay. You gonna eat your cornbread? Let me say, hold up. I already talked about that. So if you don't follow the Woke Mama online, shout out to the Woke Mama, because this is something I actually got from her. The Woke Mama, follow her online. But she was talking about the power of transition, and she was talking about that scene where Delta Slim is retelling that story and re-experiencing that pain, and then he goes right into a blues riff and starts to bang on the car. But from that transition from the pain of a lynching, connecting to the blues, and then the next scene is there in the cotton field. It goes right from that telling to the cotton field. So from Battered and Bloody to the blues, and from pain to percussion, it's this mix of rhythm and ritual that is a interplay, right? And this balance, right? This duality that we see in the twins that's very popular in African spirituality, but it's also this notion of good and evil not being polarized or compartmentalized. If I ask you who are the bad characters in the film, we can have a discussion for, all night. Because somebody can say, well, they was good in this way, but not in that way. And I think that nuance of humanity, the realism, made it so people could identify with these characters. Because there was this character all good, you're like, well, that's just him. Everybody else ain't no Superman. We can't relate. But a lot of the parts in this movie, people could relate to. Now, if you have a source you want to look at, I would suggest either Without Sanctuary, that's the picture book, and 100 Years of Lynching. By Brother Ginsburg. And that's just news articles. So you can literally read, it'll say Philadelphia, Negro chased down Lombard Street, captured on South Street, cut off his hands, burned him in front of a crowd of 500. Like, it'll break it down. You'll look at any city in America and they got a news article for you, and you can read it because they were reporting it and bragging about it and keeping the body parts as souvenirs and bringing their children to watch somebody be murdered. And then they were trying to use postcards with the pictures. But now they want to act like nothing happened and nobody knows nothing and we need to all move on. But if you look online, they still selling this stuff. If you go to buy it, they selling it for thousands of dollars. This was a good line to me. He said, we one people. I don't see color. Almost felt like Rodney King was in the movie for you. Can't we all just get along, right? And there's a very interesting part where they said, you got to invite the evil in. And if you remember Cornbread's scene when he's at the door, there's a moment where he tries to come in. He ends up not coming in. Not to get too deep into it, but then he's about to walk away, but he almost doesn't even walk. He takes like 2 steps, right? And he says, can I at least get paid for my work? And he does like this, right? So a lot of people think that an invitation can only be one way. Like, are you coming tonight? You want to come out to an invitation could be somebody getting in your personal space and you not backing up or setting a boundary. Because people could be testing you. They're trying you. They want to see if they can get away with it. They call it the foot in the door phenomenon. Can I have $1? I really want 50, but if you give me the 1, I got a better chance of getting that 50 because you didn't open the door, right? So I think the proverbial physical doors being opened are not the only way that you could let evil in. And I think that was powerful because a lot of times you're looking at the film thinking, just close the door. But it's a lot easier than it actually is, right? Because in our lives, people say the same thing about us. If he's that bad, why didn't you break up with him? Why you got 2 kids about to say? Oh, let me stop. I'm being too real. Somebody gonna think about. Okay, but seriously, it looks a lot easier than it is when you in it. When you the one being tempted, when you the one in the mess, when you the one with the soul ties and you connected, it's not so easy just to, this is somebody he had history with. This is somebody he was friends with just an hour ago, right? Close. So it's not easy to just. And everybody before that was like, you so big, why can't you just come in? Something ain't right. You's a haint. Why don't you just admit it? You dead, right? So everything, Stack is hearing all this. Stack is at the door the whole time. Why is Stack gonna go in his pocket and even reach out? Let me not. I'll let y'all see the movie. So luckily for us, there's a lot of thinkers that have been cleverly and effectively delineating between this I don't see color, we're all the same narrative, but still recognizing the reality historically of a common genealogy of all humankind, like that everybody comes from that Eve gene of a black woman and out of Africa came all nations. 2 separate stories, right? One is a recognition of our genetic similarity, but politicized as a means to minimize the impacts and ramifications of race in the world and white supremacy. One is like a cloak to cover up some stuff. The other is, yeah, we are all technically connected. Not to deny the ramifications of racial discrimination, but also not to, lose the fact that there's only one race, and just because people created race as a means of hierarchical oppression against the darker peoples of the planet, I'm not negating the effects of it, but to buy into it and to think that it's real might be the most successful thing a racist can possibly do, is to create a reality, the definition of power, and have us accept it as our own. And that's why we find a lot of people calling themselves white. We'll get to that in a minute. Y'all got a little bit of time. Interesting foreshadowing, only if you see the movie second time, right? Well, or if you saw this lecture first. When Delta Slim is at the door and they ask about Cornbread not being there, Delta Slim says, what, you think I can't handle it? And if you know the way the story goes, Delta Slim ends up being the one to stand in the gap between the vampires and them when they make their escape, right? So he could handle it. He made the ultimate sacrifice and he battled a whole bunch of vampires by himself. But it's interesting, while he's sitting there, they're looking at his age and not his heart and his courage, right? There's another scene where he says, you could drive when we get back. Sammy's leaving with Stack, and he said, you like this car? He said, yeah, I like this car. You want to drive it? He said, when you're on the way back. And if you remember how the movie opens, is him driving the car on the way back, as promised, just like they promised, we'll get him back in one piece. When they saw Pastor Jebediah, the father, and he comes out to see them, calling for his son, and he sees them for the first time in the film, he says, don't worry, we'll get him back in one piece, right? So we see him in the car riding back in one piece, just like we saw Delta Slim handling it. There's a few others, but I'm not going to get into that too much. This scene was interesting because it was just like that Killmonger scene in Black Panther where he talked about bury me with my ancestors in the ocean. Remember that scene? Where Michael B. Jordan as Killmonger talks about, not wanting to sell out and not wanting to be like the people from Wakanda, and he'd rather die, right? He'd rather be in the ocean with his ancestors than to be compromised and turn his back on the master of his people, right? And I thought about that when they were talking about freedom. Like, what does freedom mean? Is it freedom from compromise? Or is it freedom from oppression? And can they be one and the same, right? Because sometimes people think, well, if you're going to be free in America, you're going to have to make some compromises. Or you could be Kennedy, or you could be Martin Luther King, you could be Malcolm, you could be Tupac. I mean, you could be free for a little while, I guess. But if you're gonna, or you could be free behind the door. Shout out to Sam Greeley, Spook sat by the door, like Ozzy and Ruby. Like they cannot really know what you really think or what you're really up to until it's too late and you already did it and you're gone. And then they find out, well, you should have did you like Sam Cooke if you was gonna be helping the civil rights movement, right? And they're like, got him, right? They didn't know till the eulogy of Malcolm X. They said we was never gonna be free. Looking for freedom we wouldn't ever find. And I talked earlier about Jonathan Majors running away from the white woman and losing everything. And I compared this to a game of chutes and ladders with all broken ladders and chutes that all lead back to start. You can be the Harvard Law Review first black president. You can have a white mom from Kansas. You can bomb Libya and depose democratically elected leaders like Muammar Gaddafi, and they will still call you Barack Hussein Obama, the communist, Muslim, terrorist. Hey, all the way back to start. I don't care if your mom white. I don't care if you went to Harvard. I don't care if you bomb black people. I don't care if you was the porter in chief and the drone. I don't care about none of that. You do what? You wear a tan suit. All bets are off. You're like, bro, I killed for you. I did the suit. But if you realize you wasn't never gonna be free. I think it was Neely Fuller who said, if you don't understand white supremacy as a global system and how it functions, everything else will only confuse you. You can watch the news and be like, why did that woman curse out that little baby recently and called her the N-word all them times and then raised $400,000? I don't understand why she said it. I don't understand why they support it. If you don't understand white supremacy as a global system, everything else you think you understand will only confuse you. Shout out to Neely Fuller Jr. Rest in peace. The juke joint, my first reference is always that Good Times painting, right? The kind of party. And when the dad said people sweating on each other and shirking their responsibilities, right? And I was thinking that sounded like fun. I didn't say that, Okay, so freedom just for a few hours. Ernie Barnes. Some of y'all probably never seen Ernie Barnes. That's Ernie Barnes. That's the one who we see the Good Times, the picture. That's Ernie Barnes. And people always talk about the lyrics, and they were saying that it was hanging in a chow line, and people were saying hanging in a jiving, because it really doesn't make sense to say you're hanging in a chow line and that's a good time, and all the other things do describe a good time, but it's still a debate like Jollof rice, who makes the best. Shout out my Africans, right? Okay, not getting hassled, not getting hustled. So when they're in this space for a few hours, they're typically not getting hassled, not getting hustled. He said, for us, by us. He said, look at this sky, it's nice to be free. Not a real freedom, or at least not a lasting freedom. But that's not what the club is ever about. The club is to create an illusion. The club is about a dream, right? It's like a casino. We know that most people aren't in here making a bunch of money and healing their families and relationships. They're going broke. They're getting drunk. They're cheating. They deluding themselves of reality. I'm gonna win. I lost 3 times, but I went to the Mac machine and I got my mortgage out. And this time, like we're all living this lie together, and that's what makes it so much fun. I was going to name some other places, but you can use your imagination. Okay. Shout out to my sister Annie. Shout out to Sister Annie. I would clap it up, but okay. Niger. Okay. So you can watch this movie again and look at Sister Annie as the 92% of black women that voted for Kamala Harris that were listened to too late. And once it was too late and everybody wanted to listen, they was like, just let it burn. You don't see black women making a bunch of videos about the first 100 days. Because the 100 days before that, they was trying to raise all the money in the world and tell everybody that the world's going to go to hell in a handbasket if y'all don't listen to us. We've been a canary in the mine politically and culturally for the last 5 generations. And then we've been raising your kids, cleaning your houses, and saving you from all kind of trouble. And if you don't want to listen, since the Moors taught the people in Spain how to bathe and preserve themselves, when they were saying in Europe that they didn't have a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of, because they literally used to do that in... You watch Oliver Twist, right? Literally, you in the pot, boom. That was it. More people died from diseases than the gun when they went around the world because they wasn't washing. So if somebody teaches you how to do something as basic as wash yourself and helps you like Columbus to live through the winter, and you turn around and kill them after that, at some point you're going to say, oh, I know what you on. And that's the scene we see later when we get to the Choctaw. But the feminine power protection, people say this a lot of times. Now they say, red pill, the manosphere. I'm a protector and a provider. Right? The only type of protection we think about is like Second Amendment and punching somebody in the face. But in the film, in the dialogue, the women knowing the men so well, I got some of the dialogue up. I'll bring it up in a minute. But she says she said, what you doing back? Right? And he says something, and then he says about the juke joint. She says immediately, was that Stack's idea? I don't just know you. I know you and your brother. And he says, yeah, he said it'd be a good idea, blah, 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 right? Who did you rob to have enough money to buy a whole mill? I know whose the idea was. I know you not back for the reason you saying, and I know you must have did some dirt to have this much money this fast. I know you smoke. But come on in. That's all outside dialogue. By the time he comes in, he says, I've been around the world. I've seen men die. All I know is money and power. And she says, you fool. Other people, the rest of the movie, when they talking tough, everybody else is like, ooh, Smoke is talking that smoke talk again. Smoke want to smoke. Everybody else bought that game. And he saw right through it. The whole time he talking, she looking at him. That ain't gonna work on me. You're not a gangster in here. and then calls him by his name, right? Elijah, right? Like, I know who you really are. Like when your parents, once you get in the house and you get in trouble, they say your whole name. When you hear your middle name, Aaron Xavier Smith, I'm getting a beating. It ain't no surprise birthday gifts or nothing going on. That's a beating right there. But the story of Haint Blue, they're talking about this dynamic between the red and the blue. But familiar with the porch paintings and the porch ceilings, this Haint Blue says these days the custom is spread to most southern states. The hue has been named Haint Blue. But in the movie, if you remember, they kept referring to the vampires as Haints. The boo hags is the custom. The Gullah Geechee people would talk about, these energy stealing soul snatchers. If you leave your window open while you're sleeping, the folklore would say that the boo hags will come, and while you're sleeping, they'll suck the air out of you and suck the life force out of you. They said they're translucent. They said it's like a jellyfish, right? And they slide through peepholes and keyholes and windows that are open. And they say if you ever wake up real tired, you slept all night, but you woke up exhausted. And they would say, the mythology would say that you were dealing with some of the Haint people, or the Haints, the Gullah Geechee Nation, if you're familiar. Descendants of the enslaved Africans brought to the coastal region, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida, working on rice, indigo, so we get the whole the connection from, and the Sea Island cotton plantations. Unique cultural blend. You got African spirituality, American influences, Gullah Geechee people known for their distinct language, music, foodways, and art. And you saw some of the Creole moments in the film, right? When Annie was giving some of her dialogue, those connections were made. And this is what I talked about earlier, too. I named all of these things. And then she probed him, right? She probed him and opened him up the same way Mary did to Stack later. When Mary confronts Stack in the juke joint about leaving her, because the first time at train station, his eyes start watering up, but he plays tough. He says, yeah, we didn't care, right? He basically acts like he didn't care, like most black men would do in a situation where they're they're pressed to be vulnerable. So you get tough. I don't care. Everybody dealt with a young person where they said something like that. But then she says, what do you want me to say? That I love you? That I miss you, right? So then he opens up. Smoke does the same thing, with Sister Annie before that, right? Confessing. So this notion of people kept saying that they didn't know who Annie was, right? They thought it was his mom. They thought it was his sister, right? Because there's so much colorism and there's so much fat phobia, and they just couldn't imagine that this dark-skinned sister done pulled Michael B. Jordan, right? So they watching the film and they kept talking about when I first saw it, right? And I kept asking, why? And some of you have been in situations where there's been microaggressions or Karens, and they'll say something to you, and in the back of your mind, you pause for a minute. Like a police officer comes up and says, can I have your ID? And I'd be like, have I committed a crime? They say, well, I got a call. A call about what? I got a call about somebody's, sitting in the car, and it's suspicious. It's suspicious, a crime? You start to wonder, like, what made you think that? And when I was watching these recaps of Annie, and they kept pushing the Mary thing, and they didn't want to ever talk about the best chemistry on screen might have been Smoke and Annie, to be honest with you, just from an acting perspective. But I noticed that you have to push the envelope. You can't compromise and do what people expect or what they're comfortable with. And I think the problem as a nation is too many times we have prioritized the comfort and convenience of racists, even if they're murderous racists, over the safety of Black people and the progress of the nation. That's why we need the National Guard to help Ruby Bridges get into school instead of defending our borders and keeping our 260-year head start as an international superpower. We were in charge, y'all. We had won the wars. We had all the factories. How is everything being made in China? They done bombed Japan back to oblivion like twice. How did everybody catch up? Because you was too busy building 2 water fountains when you only needed 1, dummy. When you grabbing all your pipes and your iron, your engineers, and you're supporting the racist idea that their black lips touching the water is going to make you black. When you investing in that instead of actually progressing the nation and healing the nation and giving reparations and doing things like South Africa tried to do a little bit, but not enough, right? At least some reconciliation. You didn't invest in none of that. You said, I'm going to make these people feel comfortable. I'm going to give reparations to the people who own the slaves. Before they even got out of bondage, they were giving the slave masters reparations. So when you make those kind of investments, if you're involved in finance, you know that if it's not sustainable, eventually it's going to catch up with you. And that's what we see. So I really commend Ryan for not picking the traditional light-skinned, long-haired, racially ambiguous Black girl to play all the parts, right? And Mary was just Mary. But in other movies, like in the 80s, every woman in the film would have been Mary, right? Like everybody that Prince dated. Sorry, I know people love Prince. Annie was more upset. Annie was this is something else you can notice the second time you see it. Annie was more upset that Stack was the one killing her than the fact that she was dying. You remember the scene? She's on her back. She looks up. She says, "Not you." Y'all remember that? She's laying in the juke joint and she, "Not you." She already done told Smoke, if something happened to me, take me out. I ain't trying to be with that. She already made peace with her decision. I think she made peace when she decided to go to the juke joint with Smoke. I think she knew the danger she was in, right? You saw her say, "You got that mojo." She done re-upped all his stuff, right? She was doing the prayers and she knew she was going to battle. And I think she made a decision that she would rather go out with him and protect him because this is her only love and the connection that she had with the child they lost, right? Than to sit home afraid with the last chance to maybe see these people ever again. And when her moment came that she had obviously made peace with, the only thing that was troubling her was who was doing it. And another interesting thing is that Stack picked up everybody and Smoke only picked up Annie. Stack needed Delta Slim, Stack needed Sammy, Stack needed everybody. Stack was Stack right doing it. Smoke had his whole world with him in the truck. This is all I need. I need Annie. I got Annie, and I'm good to go. Okay. This y'all remember Miss Mary Mack? The story Miss Mary Mack was 1/8 black. Messing with Stack. Okay. But most people, I've never seen anybody talk about the story of Little Miss Muffet, because when Mary comes out to talk to the vampires and they singing the song, they sitting on the log and she sits right beside her, beside the vampire who frightened Miss Mary away. And I'm thinking, man, I heard a story like this. Right? It reminded me, and this is one of the eeriest, creepiest scenes in the movie, you ask me. Not just him drooling and all that, but it's interesting because they connected with her pain, right? They said, you're in pain. And a lot of times that's how temptation functions, right? Drugs, drinking, promiscuity, right? Loneliness, right? Pain. A lot of bad decisions come from pain. And I haven't been this nervous about a song since Get Out. And if you remember the song in Get Out, if the Kiswahili lyrics translate to "Brother, listen to the ancestors, run." Y'all remember Get Out when they're like, a lot of people didn't know what it meant, but what the people are saying in the song is, "Brother, listen to the ancestors, run. You need to run far." So when the scene's opening and when you hear that same song later, they telling them, "Snow bunnies never." Okay, let me shout that. Shout it down to Umar. Snow bunnies never. Okay. But yeah, they was trying to watch out. Be alert. That's I say it that way. Another one is "Pick Poor Robin Clean." When they in front of the juke joint, they sing their song, right? "Pick Poor Robin Clean." I made the analogy to a casino. That means you lost it all. Like they ran through your pockets. They got the best of you. That. So when they talk about, there's a literal sense in terms of picking the carcass or picking the corpse, the vampire, obvious top layer, but there's another layer when it comes to cultural appropriation and him wanting to take control of the music and be involved in watering it down and to be the center of it. Because when he did his song, if you notice, every race was out there, but who was leading it and who was centered? They all came around him at the end, right? That was the real dream. The real dream was, we're all going to be family and I'm going to be in charge. We all going to be together and y'all going to follow me. And a lot of people critique allyship of whites in black spaces because a lot of times the critique is, y'all don't want to be here to learn and to help and to align yourself with our cause. You want to be in charge of us. So you want to be a more gentle master. Let me not. Okay. Culture vultures, right? Picking the carcass clean. They pick Poor Robin clean. So this is a Pat Boone. And that's Vlad from Vlad TV. They call him a culture vulture. And that's a plus sign because I thought if you just take Jim Crow and then some Pat Boone, you get Drake. No, just kidding. Oh, too soon? Okay. Stack Tempted by Mary, right? Tupac, a song called Temptations. So it was interesting to see that when Stack receives the money from a different time and a different place that was given by Remick outside, Mary brings the money back. Stack immediately starts asking about the money. He said, "What do they want? Something to drink?" She goes right in and starts kissing him. Right? When he starts to try to figure out what's next and what happened and what's going on, right? When you're trying to reason, that's why a lot of times when people try to play on your emotions and they try to intimidate you or they try to rush you, right? You ever been in a sales situation where somebody's like, "Well, right now, if you do right now, it's $30 right now. If you do right now, I can do 30 right now." And what do we say when we used to be downtown with the Asian shop owners? And we say, "I just want to shop around." Sometimes we wasn't even planning to shop around, but we knew if we walked toward the door, we get a better deal. They say, oh, no, how much you want to pay? How much for you, right? So you act like you leave. You say, no, I just got to check around first, right? So it's interesting to see, how Temptation was working even within that space with Pearline and Sammy and Stack and Mary. And then to get mad at Grace at the end, when everybody else had already succumbed to the temptation. And if you notice, a lot of times when the door was open, everybody wanted to come to the door. Ain't that how evil works? Anybody seen when the kids run to the fight and want to tape it in high school? Everybody's going toward the evil. Like, why y'all run? It'd be like somebody's fighting out there. So why would you, right? The door opens up. There's suspicion and bad energy. You see the whole cast at the door. Sammy come up even later. Like, yeah, you must be the one that was singing, right? He said, so you would kill for me. This is what Mary tells that. But you still won't tell me the truth. And I mentioned this earlier, this violence over vulnerability. I'd rather snap out than to share how I really feel. I'd rather punch a wall, storm out, throw hands. I'd rather do all that than sit down and let these tears fall and reflect on my childhood. And for most men, it'd be easier to just go out in the back and just settle it, right? Get it off your chest and come back in. So we saw this a lot in the film where, especially when these women who understood and had a connection with these men in the movie, they were pushing them to look inside and be more vulnerable and be more true to themselves. And there's a few scenes like that. And I think it was a real challenge. He was like, I'll kill them all for you. And she's like, well, if you would do all that, why can't you just tell me the truth about, how you feel about me? Shout out to Pearline. I think Pearline has an underrated performance. They're not giving Pearline enough of her due. I don't know who's somebody else saw the movie, right? When Pearline started doing when she was doing it on the stage, that's the only time in the theater I was like, I was ready to. I thought we was all getting up like Rocky Horror Picture Show. It was just me, right? But when you hear their real accents, right? When you hear that these people don't talk like that, it's such an amazing transformation to read a character, figure out how to connect with a character, and embody the character and bring it to life. Because when like, especially with some of these British actors, these people ain't lived this. I'm talking not even Mississippi, not even American racism in some instances. For them to be able, like the sister who played Annie, just being from the UK or whatever, like, this is powerful. You got Nigeria, UK, she's acting like she's a root worker in Mississippi. Like, some of the power of the performance is missed because the story is so great and the cinematography, what do they call the Korean? Ultra Panavision. Right, the 70, that's what they call it, right? And the IMAX, and the ratios and all that with and I think it's good for the young people, because for us, when we saw these movies, we would see Gone with the Wind. When I think of plantations in a film, I think of movies that I don't like, that don't make me feel good, right? There's people, just like some people, first president was Obama. That's good. I'd rather your first reference be possibilities. For other people, young people now, they were raised on Black Panther and, Sinners, and that's good, because we had to try to find our little pieces of blackness. I don't know nothing about birthing no babies, That's all we got in Gone with the Wind. That's the best we're going to get. Okay, so you get she talks about the lunar element in her song, right? So the etymology of lunatics, right? So there's this influence of the moon, right? Moving the tide, shifting the tide, submission to the allure of the pale moon, because that's what she's singing about, right? The pale moon. And while simultaneously resisting the cultural incursions of a pale man who's attempting to ride roughshod through the juke joint with his band of demons, like death riding on a pale horse. If you know the book, William Cooper, Behold a Pale Horse. So she's inside, I wouldn't say praising, but invoking and summoning and connecting with these lunar powers. Just like Sammy. Y'all know what Sammy's song was about? He talked about opening their arms. He want to be in somebody's arms. He wasn't specific, though. He literally, that scene where they're doing all the different changes, he's singing about being in somebody's arms. He wants to be in someone's arms. He wants to be invited into someone's arms. And then you see the walls disappear and the roof is on fire. And then you see him outside. You see the vampire standing right there. Oh, you called me. You got to wonder if the vampires even would have got to the juke joint if Sammy ain't started singing. Delta Slim had sung already. There was music playing the whole time. Everybody had got there. They knew where they were. They just didn't know Sammy was there. And would they have been able to overtake Sammy if he was in his own space with his preaching, praying father, or if he was in church? Interesting. So the song Bad Moon Rising. If you remember that song? Some of y'all know music like that. All right. And that's Photoshop. I put Remick vampire character in the middle of the two brothers from Creedence Clearwater Revival. So the vampire in the middle is from the movie. He just fit in right perfectly with the band. But the song says, it says, I see a bad moon arising, right? And think about in terms of the movie. I see trouble on the way, and the vampires are coming, right? Don't go around at night, right? Because it's bound to take your life. There's a bad moon on. And I'm thinking about it. I'll say, wow, this is interesting connect, but nobody's talking about these songs, right? And at the end, when whatever happens with Remick happens, you see the swirl, right? You see the whirlwind. You see I hear the hurricanes are blowing. I know toward the end of the movie, the end is coming soon. They in the water saying the Lord's Prayer. I feel rivers overflowing with the whole John the Baptist symbolism. They're saying the Lord's Prayer and before the whole, I hear the voice of rage and ruin. So you got, it's amazing. But you don't got to look at it the same way everybody else looking at it. And that's why I said, what is everybody else saying? And there's a million other things you could say. There's not another million things, but I just want to show you that it's so open because it's so layered and so nuanced and so historically contextualized that you watching this movie 3 or 4 times. It's like back in the day, they would play the same movies. It was like Karate Kid, Baby Boy, BET would play like every other day, right? But certain movies, you can just let it be on and you can just watch it because it's just certain movies had that kind of impact. So abstract whiteness. Remick says that he misses his mother tongue that was taken from him by colonization. This is the Irish vampire who talks about yearning for his homeland and his mother tongue and colonization. The first time, that's 900 years ago, first colonization of the Irish. So when he gets the money, he says different time, different place, which changes things because we have these examples. If you haven't read these books, especially these two, right? How Jews became white folks, written by a Jewish sister, and how the Irish became white, written by an Irish brother, recently deceased, right? And they talk about they were criminals. They were rapists. Literally, the same things Trump said when he came down the escalator talking about Mexicans is exactly what they were saying. And said, and worst of all, they were Irish. The reason why people are acting the way they act is because they don't know their own history. It's like an episode of one of those Mean Girls movies, like Can't Buy Me Love, Nick Cannon, where the outcast, eclectic kid gets a chance to be with the cool kids by some magic or chance, and then they end up treating their old friends bad. Then they realize that being cool isn't so cool after all because they realize the cool kids really aren't that cool, but they're mean, right? But white people, instead of seeing all that, they said, oh, we'll be cool. We'll sit at the cool kids' table. Yep, forever. You just treated us terribly. You just murdered us and kept us out of all the industries and labeled us. Du Bois said the Black Irish was called the N-word more than him. Can you imagine growing up being called the N-word and then somebody comes in and gives you that devil's bargain? Shh, come here. We're doing auditions. We need some more white folks. The white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, we only got a couple of us. So we did the math and we're going to let a couple of y'all in. So we're thinking about Polish, maybe Irish. They're like, sign me up. Sign me up to abuse other people the way you've been abusing my ancestors. And that's why I look at people all the time and I try to instill upon them, once you identify that way, can you imagine somebody saying, I identify as Nazi? And somebody says, well, you got to understand the history of the Nazi party. It was made to oppress and abuse other people. So even though you might not be acting like the Nazis used to act, you saying that you're a Nazi is still perpetuating an evil system of hierarchy. You saying that you're white when you used to be Polish and you used to be Italian and German is perpetuating a hierarchical system predicated upon the oppression of African people primarily. So the second you buy into that and identify that way, you're playing that game. Because the only reason you would abandon hundreds of years of history and culture and language and landmass and flag and identity and connection to your ancestors is because you want privilege. And you know that privilege comes at the expense of other people. So when somebody tells you they're white, you can have a conversation with them and you can see if they know or if they just want to stand on that business. Because you could easily be Italian today. You could easily be German today. When you go back to Germany, you don't say you're white. You only say that, you only play them games here. And a lot of people know people like that. You ever see somebody talking to themselves real crazy until some young YNs walk up, young nation builders, with their ski masks on and the so-called crazy person stops acting crazy? They know who to get crazy with. Right? They know who to play that white game with. They play that white game over here. They go back home and they know they're going to get laughed at by their own people and be like, what's white? So you got to recognize and understand that when Remick was saying you could be free, you're not going to be free, the same freedom, the same denied freedom that was later confirmed by Smoke and Stack when he said, well, working for freedom will never find. Remick said this to them when he's making his bargain. He's saying, which complicates his character, I should say anti-hero. You can watch the movie, and instead of assuming who's the bad guys and the good guys, you could really think. Remic's at the door basically saying, I know these white folks. They colonized us twice. You're going to lose your land, you're going to lose your language, and you're going to lose your soul. You're going to have no power, and that's the way it goes. He's at the door saying, we could team up. I could help you. You could live through this. You can have powers beyond what they have, right? So there's a part of Remick that even though there's this white savior element and all the other problematic elements, not to mention the vampire element, there's some truth that is confirmed by later in the movie, Smoking Stack saying the same thing. We wasn't ever going to be free. Remick is telling them right now, y'all in this juke joint pretending. You got this fake momentary freedom, but I'm here to let you know, as somebody who's been dealing with them for generations, y'all ain't never going to be free. So you might as well team up with me, right? So he mentions the hopelessness associated with living under the weight of racial oppression. He offers eternal life, quote unquote, right, for a price of their souls. He knew about colonization. I mentioned all that. So you got to think. There's lynching, there's shooting, there's castrating. And under white supremacy, it's like this pain is life. The reason why people are not, even today, the reason why people don't care whether they live or die is because of how entrenched suffering and pain and even loss is to the lives of a lot of young people. This friend died, that friend died, this person's locked up, never saw my dad, blah, all this stuff, this person's struggling with drugs. Once there's so much pain and suffering around you, people are like, well, you're going to get, if you keep acting like that, you're going to get locked up. We need to stop with the approaches that don't have impact. Because I hear a lot of people saying, I try to tell these young people, if they keep doing that, they're going to die. Like I said earlier, so are you. And they looking at you like, you probably going to die before me. You look old. You know, because they think 30 is old. I know somebody think they were out of it. It's like, oh, you thought I wasn't talking about you. You talk to them, you tell them you're 30, they like, damn. Like Kevin Hart and Don Cheadle, right? You want SSI. In the movie called Paid in Full, Cameron plays a character, and people get shot every day, B. You'll be all right. It's really the sentiment. People die every day. People get shot every day. You coming up saying somebody going to die or somebody going to get shot to a person who lives in the community, they're like, I know, I live here. They might be like, I did the shooting. Don't let the devil in. This is one of the best messages that transcend spiritual affiliation, transcend how you digest, interpret the film. This notion of having physical representations of our daily temptations. You have to coalesce. You have to agree. You have to be a willing participant. It's literally a Leviathan. It's literally a hypnotism. Just like I talked about racism. We have to agree that it's real. When Blumenbach and them first said, I got something called the ladder of races and hierarchy, they could have been like, get out of here. That sounds stupid. A lot of ideas get rejected, you know. There's a lot of ideas that have far more basis in science that we don't adhere to today. Just like whether it's the metric system and liters and gallons or inches, people decide what they want to go by. We decide one thing, and the rest of the world decides something else, right? When it comes to measurement. You can agree that it's real and make it real, or you can call it out for the BS it is, which takes its power Wizard of Oz style for a callback. Remember when the curtain got pulled back? Everything else that they thought was real and powerful lost its power in terms of their perception. And when the Wicked Witch went, everything else just disintegrated and crumbled. Just like when Remick had his situation, all the other demons, right? It gets to the root of it. I say you can't prune a problem, you gotta get to the root. So once you strike at the heart of something, that's why I said that what I said today about race. Once you say, wait a minute, this is a lie and an illusion, and people know better, and they're still playing the game, and they're trying to play with you and acting like it's just something they have to do, and they shrug their shoulders like, what do you want me to do? I'm white. No. 3 steps back. You're not white. Let's take it back a couple steps, because here, if you go to the accepting that you're white and accepting at this point, you can't do much. It's like being in the juke joint when Grace is about to call. At this point, no, you don't have a lot of options. But you had options when he came to your house. You had options when he came to the train station. You had options when he was in the church listening to your father. Oh, there's 50 different chances to resist temptation in that movie. So let's not focus on the last 10 seconds and argue and be like, what could they do? And people love to do that. They done made a million decisions to get them where they are and be like, I had no choice. Well, not after you made the first 30 choices. You ever see those books of Choose Your Own Adventure? You can pick the pages to go to. At a certain point, you make certain decisions, you're not going to get to the end. Like you already went on the wrong path to the extent where I'll let it go. Don't forget, it wasn't just the sunrise that came in the morning, because people keep in saying this. The vampires would have left Grace and went to get Diana. They would have went to town and got her baby. She's a mom. Y'all better leave Grace alone, right? And then some people said, well, the sun was coming up. All they had to do was sit the heck down. Ain't that how temptation usually works? You in the house, you bored, you shouldn't be calling somebody, you shouldn't be leaving the house, you know the day is over, but you find yourself back outside or entertaining a phone call or a text. All you had to do was stay still. What they say, when you do all you can, just stand. All you had to do was stay still till the morning. Your whole mentality would have been different. Most mistakes you make at night, if you had waited till the morning, you wouldn't have done that. You was tired. It was night, all the lunar, whatever else going on. The lonely and the lunar. I like that. The lonely and the lunar. That could be a song. That's a bar right there. The lonely. Okay. But people were talking about, well, even in my scenario, I can critique myself and put it in the paradigm of hopelessness. If they did just sit down, you saw who came in the morning. So even if they said the vampires can't do the sunlight, we're going to just stay still and light candles, roots, and pray, whatever they were doing, or even just play music. Even after all that, as Black people in America, when you beat the vampires, then you got to beat the Klan. And the only unredeemable element of this film that has absolutely no nuance and is 100% bad and evil and deceptive and violent, to Coogler's credit, KKK. He didn't, because usually it's the opposite. Usually it's like the white savior CIA agent in Black Panther who saves Wakanda. And you leave feeling a little conflicted. Like, I like the movie, but I don't like that. You know, they make you want to love the CIA or something. You reading COINTELPRO, right? But in this movie, Coogler, like in Blaxploitation fashion, was like, no, they're evil. Point blank, period. And if you listen, I think I got a clip of this. It's later. But shout out to the Lest We Forget Museum. I know a lot of people end up seeing this, right? So if thousands of people are going to watch this, when you come to Philadelphia, make sure, shout out to the Ragsdale family, the Lest We Forget Museum has artifacts and memorabilia from the enslavement period, and they have tours and great lessons. And I think it's an amazing opportunity to learn more about Jim Crow Museum of Racist Imagery. Okay, really quick. In the scene where the KKK gets to the juke joint in the morning, you hear one person say uppity and another person says, I'm going to skin me an N-word. People like to say, oh, that's urban legend. Philadelphia, this is your reference. If anybody doubts that Black people's skin was used as leather, we've heard it. We probably know it in the room. If anybody has an issue with it, this is your first source and it'll lead you to others. Philadelphia News, March 17th, 1888. And I'll just go through it briefly, but you could screenshot it or whatever. Physician of the city wearing shoes made from the skin of Negroes. He still adhered to that custom. We saw him later. He said, only last week I met upon him in the street with a brand new pair of shoes. I looked at his footwear as I always do. His pedal coverings had irresistible fascination for me. And he talks about the downtrodden Africa still beneath your feet, right? He says, I certainly do. I don't propose changing it, that respect, until I find a leather that is softer and will last longer and present a better appearance. He was wearing Black people's skin on his feet, and he was bragging about it in Philadelphia, and he was a doctor, and they had a whole article. You can see the article in the newspaper if you just look online. But people will tell you, oh, get over it. You don't even tell me what I'm supposed to be getting over. Before you tell me what to get over, tell me what it is. What's the it? Because they'll tell you quick, get over it. They got kids in grade school telling Black kids to get over it while they're taking Rosa Parks out the library. But yes, I want to make sure I brought the receipts before we had. But in that scene where the KKK gets there, they say uppity and they say, I'm going to skin me an N-word. If you remember the early scene when they're buying the juke joint, what does he discover on the floor? When he rubs the floor, what's on the floor? Somebody called out. It's blood. Because later on, Annie said that was a slaughterhouse. You think it was an animal slaughterhouse? Oh, y'all missed it. Y'all missed it. He said, I'm going to skin me an N-word. They came there ready. They came there strapped up with guns to do what they always do. They was going to make that a slaughterhouse once again. I'm going to skin me one because they uppity. He's up here thinking he's going to run a business. That's what happened to Ida B. Wells' friend. He had a competing business, right? And they lynched him. That's when she wrote the red letter, and they tried to kill her by burning down the publishing station, and she barely escaped with her life, right? The only thing more dangerous than being a radical Negro is being an educated revolutionary Negro. Knowing who you are and being confident and understanding how the mechanisms of power work. I think they hated Johnny Cochran more than they hated half these so-called revolutionaries. Okay. Like I said this earlier, because if you remember the scene where they want to get a whole hoodoo lesson when the vampire's outside. And they're like, oh, what do we need? The garlic? And but before, it was all a game and it was all a joke. But that's why I said the 92%, because now everybody want Black women to get out on the front lines and protest with all these white folks out in the street. And Black women's like, nah, y'all got it. Y'all good. Like, It's like a relay, you know. When the other person start running, you don't run with them, you know. You let them run, and when they get back around, you know, if you come back around. I just heard when they were saying cornbread when he was outside in the woods, they also say peekaboo before they grab him. That's just a reference for my hip hop fans. And you'll hear that next time you watch the movie. They'll be like cornbread. They say faith and harmony, whatever, freedom. They say peekaboo. Sammy, you're the one I came for. Just give us little Sammy. I'll let y'all live. Some of y'all might see the movie The Golden Child, where there's like one special baby on a King Herod type thing, where they just wanted the bloodline. You know, they just wanted the sacred one that could transform the future history. That's why King Herod said, we're going to kill all these firstborn man children, because we know if we just get rid of this demographic, then we know that the savior can't come. We can interrupt destiny, the butterfly effect, right? If we could just get Sammy, we don't need the rest of y'all. If we get Sammy, we good, because Sammy got the music. Matter of fact, if we get Sammy, I trust that they believe Sammy can get the rest of y'all, because Sammy had y'all all in a trance just a minute ago. Sammy just made y'all all lose yourselves. Y'all will be cheating, smoking, drinking, dancing. He conjuring up spirits from other generations and continents. Right? Well, if we just get Sammy, we good. It's like Shador and Travis Hunter on it. Okay. I don't want to talk about the buck breaking attempt on Shador Sanders. Right? Whew. I said they'll Shador you or Shakur you. Okay. Give up the funk. That beautiful scene we've been saying for years, the roof is on fire. When I saw that roof set ablaze in the movie, I said, you know what? I never really saw a roof actually get set on fire. For all these years, we've been saying the roof is on fire. We don't need no water, right? And it just, like I said, if you're not in the culture, there's so much that you would miss. This is The Roof is on Fire. And shout out Fat Man Scoop as well. Hold on, I got some other songs on. I thought I did. Tiebreaker roll? Maybe not. But I had like Parliament, tear the roof off the mother, tear the roof off the mother. There's a bunch of them. The other one is where they say, oh, throw your hands in the air, wave them like you just don't care. And if you got on clean underwear, and he said, and you're not from Delaware, and your mama's not on welfare, somebody say, oh yeah, right. But they also say raise the roof, right? The power to break out roll. The fact that Sammy was nobody else but Sammy, I think added so much to the movie. The fact that we were meeting Sammy on screen for the first time. What's that movie with Derek Luke, Denzel Washington, Antoine Fisher? Because Derek Luke wasn't nobody else before that. So when we saw that movie, it's a whole new face, and it was that much more believable. So when we met Sammy, it wasn't like, oh, I liked him in these other movies. I think it was really special. Like when you get a breakout role, that's why even actors, it's important to choose this role wisely. You know, shout out to Kevin Hart. He made it through Soul Plane, but you got to be careful, you know, how you hit that big scene, because they might remember you the wrong way. Shout out to Soul Plane. Convenient faith. We saw a lot of this as well. I'm going to get close to closing. Okay. Before the bullets, it's all about the self, right? And then I've seen people in these situations. I know people that are completely irreligious, right? They hate the Bible. They hate religion. But if they get shot, they say, oh, my God. I'd be like, I thought you didn't know him. Why are you calling somebody you don't know? I'm talking about hardcore brothers. Like, you would think that they worship the Little Durk or somebody. That's all they listen to. That's all they talk about. But the second something really happens, the second that the veil is lifted and life gets real and it's life and death in conversation, oh my God, please, oh my God, please. I'm looking at a bunch of drug dealing, killing gangsters praying, which told me, oh, so when you're not praying, you really just playing. All that other stuff, that whole life you was living was an act, because deep down you knew. Because when you got shot, nobody ran up to you and said to start praying. You knew instinctively, this is what I need to do, what I should have been doing. Had a spiritual connection, right? So there's this convenient faith. If you remember, Smoke is at Annie's house talking about, I seen power, like I said earlier. But then later on, he says, you got any more of that? When the vampire's outside, he want her to work her magic. And part of it is pain, because he says, why didn't that magic help our baby, right? She said, I don't know, but it helped you. It protected you. Sammy quoting his father. My dad said, if you entertain the devil, he gonna come up. Why didn't you listen when he said it at the church in the beginning of the movie? Now he in a juke joint quoting his dad, reading the scriptures all good in the beginning, right? So we have a lot of this in society where people know better, and you can't instill willingness in another person. That's why even as parents, a lot of times you gotta let people bump their head. You ever see a kid get told not to touch a stove and then they touch that stove? I ain't never seen that parent crying. That's what you get. I told you don't get. Now you're gonna sit, right? Good for you. I tried to tell you, hard head, soft behind, burnt fingers. Now get out the kitchen. So I did all that. This was powerful. Jordan Peele and Ryan Coogler have been showing the world how traumatic and terrifying racism is on a daily basis to black people. You know, in a movie, you got to have like all these special effects. You know, Thanos and disintegrations and you got to be. We scared by the police. Get Out was terrifying when you saw that black man walking in that all white neighborhood and they played that white music. We were scared for that brother. We knew something bad was about to happen. I didn't even know what the movie was about, but I knew it was danger lurking. Forget the Kiswahili part. When I heard that white music playing out that car, that sports car, and he was alone in that white neighborhood, I was like, and he's showing the world what you think is scary is the way we think of you. They could be dressed just like this. They don't need all the fangs and the makeup with the blood dripping like the old drag. No, you're scary enough just trying to infringe on our culture and steal and oppress us by deceit. And we're the ones that end up dead and broke. There's that one scene where they say that they scary and spooky when they walked away. And then one of the characters say, crackers at night will do that to you. And if you know the history of Knight Rider, not the show, but this is one of the historical markers for the Knight Rider movement, right? Just go fast. Knight Riders in Black folk history. Term Knight Rider, white caps, right? The White Citizens Council, bald knobbing, right? Terms denoting extra legal acts of violence targeting select groups, mostly black people. So, you know, when you're supposed to be with your wife having babies, so 40 years later, you're not marching with tiki torches saying that Jews will not replace us. You could have replaced everybody yourself if you had just been with your wife instead of riding around on horses trying to scare black people. Different lecture for a different day. But there was a custom of people trying to disturb people's peace, trying to scare them at night, trying to light crosses on their lawns. So when they say in the movie, crackers at night will do that to you, will scare you, it's like a callback to a lot of this type of racial terror that occurred mostly at night. And this is funny too. They asked Remick to his face, y'all the Klan? He says, we believe in equality. He didn't answer the question. But it was interesting, not that he's a member of the Klan, but it was interesting because that's the way that racism and deception function, right? I don't see color. I got a black friend. But you got a black girl locked in your basement. Yeah, but my wife is black too. That's just my black girlfriend. You know, because a lot of people think that absolves them of any actions that they partake in, you know, just proximity to blackness. Okay, so the FUBU notion, they talk about Mound Bayou. Who's familiar with Mound Bayou? Did y'all know about that? One person? Okay. So this historic part called Mound Bayou, largest U.S. Negro town, settled July 12, 1887. So when they're saying two times, one time with Sammy, you don't need to go to Chicago. You need to take yourself with the respectable Negroes at Mount Bayou. You need to go live a peaceful life, use your art, probably in a church, and be safe with these respectable Negroes. And this is the criminal telling like the drug dealers on the corner saying, yo, man, you can play ball, stay in school, man, don't come out with us, right? So literally starting to steer him to respectability politics, not knowing, because this is what, 1920, right? 20 or 21, when it started? 20, right? Or 22. If it was 22, it was after Tulsa, so that'd be interesting. But yes, this is a picture. So Smoke is trying to protect his cousin Sammy the way he has protected his brother Stack. He wishes to save him from a world he knew all too well by urging him to go to Mount Bayou and live among what he called the proper Negroes. If you remember Key and Peele, they had a skit called Negro Town, where he talks about a place where you're free from police brutality, and it's a big comedic skit and it's a big joke, but a lot of people don't know that there's history to this notion of Negro Town. This is a Southern woman in Negro Town, 1855, trip to Princeton. Let me skip to the end. Free black residents were intelligent and hardworking people, fully capable of supporting themselves and their families, a position that contradicted common arguments in favor of slavery. 1855. Emancipation Proclamation is signed in 1865. People were doing fine. People knew that integration had nothing to do with our success or peace. Proximity to white people wasn't even on their radar. They just wanted freedom from oppression. But they don't teach the story like that. They teach the story like, oh, everybody's enslaved, everybody's doing bad. Then Martin Luther King comes and he sets us all free by sitting next to white people. And then Barack Obama, right? And scene. So here's another one. It says Negro land on this map. Negro land, right? Referred by Europeans describing a section of West Africa. I'm trying to go through some of this fast. Let me see. Same thing. Another map, Negro town, right? What happens to a town's dream deferred? We know about Tulsa and all the times when you do have a Negro town, it's buried underwater, you know, it's bombed. They run a freeway through it, or they take it over like Central Park, which used to be Seneca Village, another Negro town. So I said our fathers had a religion of their own. This is when we talk about the Choctaw people. Our parents wished us to do good as they used to make us do good, sometimes correct us for doing evil. This is the current chiefs of the Wyandot Nation. These are the Indian chiefs today. I'm gonna leave that right there. I'm not doing this with y'all. I'm just showing a picture and moving on. I'm just showing you. Y'all know about the $5 Indians, right? When people would sign their names on the doors and to get. I'm just letting y'all know that that's who's out there right now. So if you go to the plantation, you say I saw the movie, you gonna be like, wait, no, this is who you gonna see. You're gonna think you're human resources. Oop, what I do? Okay, I'm gonna do 5 minutes and I'll be done. 14 years after almost the entire Choctaw population forcibly relocated during the Trail of Tears, U.S. government, tribe donated $170 over $5,000 today to victims of the potato famine in Ireland. The Choctaw have a historical connection to the Irish. So when you see the scene of Remick running in with his Irish heritage and the Choctaw chasing him because he's went astray in terms of, there's a whole history with these people. They've been locked in for a long time, right? But if you notice, I think I got it on the slide too. I'll say it when it comes up. Okay, the warning. That's what I'm talking about. Race over peace. People chose race over peace, just like people today voted against their interests recently. So instead of having industry and progress with a black woman behind the podium, they preferred racism, and they're suffering accordingly. The native people knew the truth, and y'all chose whiteness. So the same way black women said, y'all got it, I'm done with y'all doing this. In the movie, you see the same thing happen with the Indian people. If you saw the movie Killers of the Flower Moon, how they would mix in the bloodline and take their land and do all this stuff, they're familiar with these people. They say, be careful. He's not who you think he is. He sees the Klan robe in the background and changes his appeal to a racial appeal and says, dirty Injuns. And then he offers money. He appeals to their racism and their greed, and he gets let in. Once he, y'all some of them stupid people who prioritize race over everything else. Once he sees that Klan robe, he's good to go. Oh, these dirty Injuns. Oh, and the next thing you know, he's in the house. The Choctaw leader says, don't trust him. Now you think he is. She doesn't oblige him. They up the guns again. He basically says, God be with you. Right? The brother on the horse like, it's getting late, getting dark. Right? Because when you've been through it a lot of times, you're not spending all your time with your mind blown, acting like it's something new. They warned them one time, you ain't never see the Choctaw again in the movie. They didn't go to the juke joint to help nobody. If y'all didn't learn from what happened to us, don't that sound familiar, black folk? If y'all didn't learn from the way they treated us, I don't care if you're coming from Ghana or Nigeria or if you're coming from El Salvador, if y'all didn't learn from how they treated us, we're going to sit back and give y'all a generation. And the names are going to change. The names are going to start to sound like Botham Jean, Abdulawima. And now you see people like, oh, that's what y'all was talking about 40 years ago. When Howard Beach and it was trying to tell you when y'all was getting them those what do you call it, those citizenship classes with the milk and honey analysis, told to stay away from the African Americans, like we lazy and dumb and bad, and then the people you needed to talk to really learn the way these people actually are was us. But they was telling you to stay away from us and giving you loans that they wouldn't give to us, even though it was our money in those banks from our black churches and our black communities that they destroyed for 50 years. We couldn't get loans in them same banks. You came over here that week and got a loan, and you think something's wrong with us and don't know why we can't get our stuff. Let me get off this soapbox and wrap this. But you got people still, I will vote for Donald Trump, right? This proximity to whiteness is going to save me. I want to be with the cool kids table. I don't know what they did to you, but I know I don't want to be you. They only given two choices out here, black or white. So in my defense, they're saying to us, I didn't make this system. They made me white or black. I'm not choosing black. Very few people, right? Even black people was passing. Let's not act like there's a whole lot of black people that was black, but they look just white enough to be like, I'm going to go ahead over here. Right? Imitation of life. Deny my own mother. Y'all ain't never going to see me again. Because if I had a choice, who would choose this? Wardrobe, white supremacy is already a horror story. I talked about this already. It's already scary enough. I talked about that already. So shout out to the costume. So lastly, the only critique I had was Sammy wasn't limping when they grabbed the artillery out the truck. Everything else in the movie, completely perfect. Sammy jumped from that window like 2 stories down. Remember that? He should have been limping more than that. He should have been limping more than that 2 minutes later. That's the only critique I have. That's just one thing. I thought it was funny when Smoke and Stack were fighting and he sounded like Terrence Howard one time. He was like, "What's wrong with you, man?" But I thought that the scene where Smoke is teaching the young girl how to negotiate was so beautiful. When he drives to the store, he said, numbers got to be in conversation with one another. Right? He gave her all this information. He gave her courage. He gave her an understanding of negotiation. He gave her employment, right? He trusted her. He gave her the car. Everything's in the car. He trusted. Like there was so much. The ways, the subtle, small, everyday ways that people are poured into and built up. Like I talked about, Dr. Asante asked me if I considered the PhD. Lastly, a couple ideas to think about what could be next. Prequels or sequels. Star Wars made us you can give a before. So my first one would be, I would love to see what happened in Chicago. I would love to see a Harlem Night style. I mean, gritty like Hoodlum, historically contextualized. They can call it Smokestack, Fire in the Shy, right? It'd be Harlem Nights meets Hoodlum meets Devil in a Blue Dress. If you saw that movie with Don Cheadle and Denzel Washington, because I think that would be a great film, right? And just knowing how it ends. And usually, the black people don't win in those movies. Secondly, I would love to see a sequel with Marion Stack in the 90s. Maybe they take all their evil intentions and start a hip hop label. Maybe they call it Death Row. No, I'm just kidding. But I would love to see them get into hip hop and, the same way they were trying to take control of the music, right? We saw intellectual rap and we saw conscious rap turn to gangster rap. That would be a great backdrop for the next chapter in Stack and Mary's corruption of black music and humanity through evil and deception, like Lost Boys meets Vampire in Brooklyn. And I even gave it a name. Let's see if y'all like the name. No Biting Allowed. You like that? You see what I did there? That's a Master Ace from the symphony, the sign at the door, no biting allowed. If you didn't read it, I suggest you do so, or you'll be stranded, just like Caruso. But thank you very much. It's been a privilege, an honor, and a pleasure to present to you this afternoon. We only got like 5 minutes for questions, but I can take like 2 or 3.
Okay, I was very impressed with something you said. It was very profound. And the thing about it, the profundity of it is something that we all could easily understand and practice. But because of what we're exposed to, we don't conceptualize reality that way. And that is the practice of the conscious remembrance of death makes you appreciate everything, breathing. Mm-hmm. Now, if you wake up in the morning and live your life like that way and take nothing for granted, you want to live another 100 years, but if you would die in the next moment, that's okay too. Why? Because you are living right. That's how profound that is. But the ironic thing about it is we all could understand that, and we all could practice that. We're not.
Make you do the 5-minute version, bro. I only got
Okay, well, I'm gonna let that go right. Yeah. That's why I just wanted to say that. I was very impressed when you dropped that.
No, I appreciate it. And I will say, Kareem, you got this mic. But one thing I would say to that is, some of you might even remember having a feeling of missing somebody so much that you wish they can come back just to even have a fight again. There's family members I miss even fighting with them. I wish they was here nagging me again. I wish my grandmother was here saying, when you gonna graduate college? I miss those conversations. So, you can like I said, to take everything, every aspect, even the bickering, even the so-called nagging, when it's gone, you wish you can, hear that voice just one more time. But anybody else? Any other questions before we go?
Okay. Looking at what is happening in the world and the movie Sinners and how Coogler and Michael B. kind of pulled that whole thing together where it symbolizes what we're experiencing. And then when I think about what's happening in Burkina Faso and how that the president in that country is influencing the whole continent, looking at reclaiming their power and the impact, if we're paying attention, that it's having, to the world, and that we need to stay focused on the revolution is happening today, and we need to be cognizant and play our part. So I wanted to get your...
Oh, yes. Shout out to Michael Sean, who's here today. Michael Sean is actually one of the first people to give me opportunity on the radio when I was doing FM radio. So shout out to Michael Sean, he's in the house. We were on, I don't know, I can hear this. We were on, my mic is real low, I don't know why. But we were on 100.3 The Beat together. It was before that Philly 103.9. We were competing with the Hot Boys back in the day on a night show. So we used to be on there interviewing all the rappers and making jokes. And so we've been working for a long time. But recently we were on a podcast with a former coworker of ours, Envy McKee. So shout out to Envy McKee. And I brought up Ibrahim's situation because Michael Langley, that's the general that looks like a robot. He looked like a skinwalker. I ain't never seen no black man look like that. It looked like one of the masks they be talking about that he wearing. But he did the Gaddafi thing before Congress. You know that, right? He recently got before Congress and he tried to describe Touré the way they described Gaddafi to set the stage for a coup or an assassination or to depose. So the same way we saw with Aristide, the same thing we saw, they're doing it again. So a lot of people on the continent are making videos now saying to Americans, please don't support your government doing this again. Democratically elected official, don't believe what they're saying we feel about him like they try and do with Haiti with this whole gang talk. We love him. He is taking control of our minds and he's trying to sell our natural resources for market value. We're the only continent that could sustain itself without trade. He is revolutionizing Africa. It's not just affecting Burkina Faso, but the whole African continent is looking around like what could be possible. And they're trying to act like he's doing something wrong the same way they did to Gaddafi when he tried to have his own currency based on the gold standard. They're like, don't go for it this time. And they're really trying to warn us because they know that our platforms and our voice and our resource and our influence are more impactful. They have the information and the cultural connections, but they recognize that we have the resources and the platform. So they're trying to tell us in America, like literally like school days, Lauren Fishburne, wake up. There's things that they keep pushing in your face to distract you from what they really want you to see. They keep giving you first 100 days. Elon Musk, is he part of it? Donald Trump said this. They don't like Jasmine Crockett. He said he's going to deport somebody. Like all those are relevant stories to some extent. But when you keep seeing the same story for 24 hours, you know how big the world is. And they haven't said a thing about Burkina Faso. Just like we've been going through this in the Congo, what we up to like 14 million people done died and got displaced or been displaced. They ain't say nothing about the Congo. You know, they don't say nothing about the Sudan, right? They have a way of just keep pushing the same story in your face so you end up not knowing anything about anything. And it gives them the power and control over you.
Right, because they had a Continental Day of protest Thursday or Wednesday, the 30th. And I was looking for some type of coverage of that, even in the what is that African news Jazeera's.
Oh, okay, Al Jazeera.
And I wasn't seeing anything of what was happening, but I got some feedback from a friend of mine in Ghana. She said it was all over the continent.
No, I'm saying that lets you know where you stand. And a lot of times people really think, I always say the worst thing that we do sometimes is not realize who our enemies are. When you're with somebody you think loves you and your friend and they have the worst intentions for you, you're done for. If you're going to the news to find the truth or to find what you should do in the world or to learn the history of your people or what's the future for your people, and you watching CNN, you already lost. They already got you. Because you can't go 5 years without talking in depth about the Sudan or the Congo, because they wouldn't do that if that was Switzerland. If millions of people were dying and being deported and being displaced, if 1,000 people died in Israel, they talked about it for a whole year. Ukraine too. And then Ukraine wouldn't let the black people on the train when they was running from Ukraine. Remember that? And then they was on the news talking about, we just didn't expect it here. Remember they were saying that? It's a European nation. One person even said white. They said, we didn't expect it here. Say, oh, the truth come out. You expected it for us. That happened after 9/11 when the Arab community said they're treating us like the new black man. So you knew. So the whole time we've been going through hell, trying to convince people, and people been acting like it's all in our mind, which makes us even more crazy. Y'all knew. So when we were outside getting bit by dogs and sprayed by hoses, y'all knew. When we was getting shot in the street before our wedding day, like Sean Bell, all that, y'all knew. Y'all understood perfectly. Y'all just knew it wasn't you. So, you know, like then they came for me and then there was nobody there to speak for me, as the famous poem goes, right? Rabbi Niemöller. You know, they came for the Jews. I wasn't a Jew, so I didn't speak up. They came for trade unionists. I wasn't a trade unionist, so I didn't speak up. Then they came for me and there was nobody left to speak for me. And that's how they do it. Pick people off one at a time. And because you didn't care when they erased the Choctaw, you didn't care when they enslaved the African, you didn't care when they deported all the Chinese with the Exclusion Act, you didn't care when they interned all the Japanese. No, you didn't care. So now you're seeing like the last groups left to get the wake-up call that everybody else already had for the last 50 to 100 years, and they're looking for sympathy. I saw somebody online talking about something, what about Nebraska? I said, Nebraska? I saw how y'all voted. All right, what about y'all votes? Literally, you asked for it, you got it, and now you're not just complaining about it, you're blaming other people and expecting them to come save you for what you. No. A lot of times, the best thing you can do with evil, I'll close on this. Sometimes the best thing you can do when it comes to evil and negativity and distractions is just to stay out the way, stay to yourself, and stay focused on what really is relevant in your life. Seriously. Because they want to get you in the debate and your attention. Because without your attention, your eyeballs are dollars. Without you watching it, it loses its power. It's like the Wizard of Oz. You know, they said the average viewer for CNN and Fox is like 65 or something. Like it's not sustainable. Like you talk to somebody in high school where you get your news, no one is saying in MSNBC. Like no 20-year-old is saying, you know, Anderson Cooper tell me all my stuff. Like, no, this is a dying entity and it has to transform and adapt. If you ever went fishing and you pulled the fish out the water and the fish starts flapping around, that's how white supremacy is right now in its final dying stages. It's going to be desperate. It's going to be violent. It's going to try to get you involved and on the same frequency. You stay back. You stay calm. You don't get on the ground and flop with the fish, and you watch it die. And if you're lucky, you have a good dinner afterwards. Thank you. Wow. Oh, and we got the book out too. I got a couple copies. Dr. Santi, I'd be remiss if I didn't say, you can close it out, but on the 9th, we're doing an event for young people on STEM, right? A STEAM event with Dr. Anderson. And I have a few copies of the book that Dr. Santi's been talking about that me and him wrote on Du Bois. So if anybody wants a book, I got the books, and thank y'all for coming out.